Pokemon ZA's trailer came out not too long ago and I've been thinking about it ever since. Game Freak is taking the beloved franchise back to the X and Y era one last time to close a chapter on what was left over a decade ago. Before I jump into theories and opinions regarding ZA's setting, I think we need to agree on our understanding of the game, right? Pokemon Legends ZA is a game set in the present in the Soul City of Lumiose. The game returns to beloved characters from Pokemon X and Y and is ultimately a penance for never releasing Pokemon Z back in 2013. In 2025, we have our first look on what they had in mind all those years ago. Ladies and gentlemen, Pokemon Legends ZA. I've made a couple shorts speaking my mind on the new trailer, and man, the Pokemon community did not like it. Regardless, on a channel I've dedicated to speaking, that's not going to stop me. And don't forget to subscribe if you like Pokemon videos like this. I've got plenty more coming. So there's a lot of things that I think Game Freak got right, and at the end of the day, the Legends installations feel very experimental knowing what we know now. Both Arceus and now ZA feel like games that they make to figure out if people like the new and unique ideas that they cooked up for the mainline series. With that in mind, I have to give Game Freak leniency, because in my opinion, it seems like these games were made intentionally controversial. That said, I have good and bad things to say about ZA, but more specifically today, I wanted to talk about the city of Lumiose. Game Freak recently confirmed that the entire game is set in Lumiose, and while I personally believe this is hyperbole, we might get to leave to smaller zones if it becomes relevant to the flow of the story. We only have what they choose to show or tell us. And no, I don't look at leaks, sorry. Let's talk about some of the good that a game set in the Soul City of Lumiose will bring. First of all, I'll get the easy conclusions out of the way. When developing a game, it's pretty obvious that the smaller you make the map, the less you have to work on it, or maybe not. One of the biggest complaints that Sword and Shield, Legends Arceus, and Scarlet and Violet received was that all of the maps had massive blank spaces in them that felt barren and useless after traversing them once. In response, I think Game Freak choosing to make the map significantly smaller in the game can mean one of two things, if not both. A smaller map means they can flesh out the details within the confined space, bringing a much more lively city to the player full of interactions, activities, and ultimately details. I would honestly be surprised and extremely butthurt if with this decision to downscale the map tenfold, they also said, "F you, every building is the useless hotel from X and Y." The other option is that making the map smaller allowed for the budget to go into the story side of things. With less time and money spent on creating a massive open world map, it leaves deep pockets to be redirected towards time and energy on the narrative team. Me personally, I wasn't fully satisfied with the story of Scarlet and Violet, and while I thought the ending was great, the steps to get there felt lackluster, just my opinion. But budgets and efforts being redirected means more attention could be placed on the story, the attention to detail, and if everything goes Blight's way, maybe even both. Game Freak, I beg of you to beat the empty map allegations. One theory I want to touch on that I think might make a game set in one city shine is the idea of different municipalities. To dumb that down, I mean segments of the city. Think of Ocarina of Time's map being broken up into pieces, or in larger, more modern scale, the Persona series. Large segments of one cohesive map broken up by zones. Though that of course doesn't affect gameplay much, it's notable that this possibility allows for the Switch to handle more things happening in a smaller area. If the city is split up into say 6 sectors and each one has a loading screen between the next, that would mean so much more can be detailed and finally perfected in every corner of the map, assuming the game's optimized of course. They did take their time on this one though, so I'd like to have faith that it will be. I'm sorry, I know, I have to do it. It would be disingenuous if I didn't tell you my concerns with the city of Lumiose being the singular place to roam in a Pokemon game. For starters, Castelia City is the perfect example of what I do not want going into this game. Half of the buildings were unimportant dialogue that ultimately felt like a waste of time to me. And while in the first playthrough they weren't bothersome or ruining my experience, in hindsight I wish they had a little bit more to them. And in contrast, if the entirety of ZA is set in a city like Castelia, I'm gonna have a real bad mentality as I walk into each building. The other major problem is of course aesthetic changes and variety in what you see around you. I have a bad feeling that ZA is gonna suffer from the Halo Infinite problem, a map that for lore reasons couldn't be allowed to have variety, and because of that the game experience suffered. I understand it's extremely difficult for Game Freak to tackle this problem, and ultimately it won't be a world ender if this concern is the reality for ZA, but I really hope that somehow they can find a way to make the game more than the copy and paste architecture and fully renovated city. It'd be cool to see, for example, a section of the city be old-fashioned and untouched, similar to Prague or Old Toronto, and maybe a section of the city could be in ruins that leads to a cave section, allowing for a cool glowy area like that one cave from X and Y, which would be the perfect chance to do a callback. They could separate sections of the cities into factions as well, with a futuristic looking area for the science and research focused citizens, and a more homey, gritty, rustic looking area for those more focused on the caretaking of Pokemon. This could also allow for great interactions with lore, and even the ability to pick a side if they created conflicts. This is of course very very wishful thinking, and I also imagine they want to tread lightly while trying to reinvent the wheel of Pokemon, but as I previously mentioned, the Legends series would be the perfect place to see if people want to choose your own adventure Pokemon game. If the city changed and reacted to the choices you made, that would be insane to me and fully justify a drastically smaller map. The last thing I wanted to touch on for ZA was the ways that it could find itself similar to Arceus, for better or worse. For starters, they of course continue to break the Pokemon formula, mixing the involved trainer aspect of Arceus into your typical turn-based Pokemon battle. I personally think this could make for some really cool plays and ultimately a very entertaining multiplayer scene. Such a drastic change in mechanics does leave room for exploits, but I'm not going to assume the worst when I don't know how much attention they've put into balancing and bug fixing. Ultimately, the mechanics seem very unique and fun, but I hope it just doesn't stray too far away to the point that the battles oftentimes don't give you time to think about your moves, or at the very least, a battle timer is an optional setting. The next thing that I think Legends ZA absolutely cannot go without is side quests similar to Arceus's. If the city doesn't give reason to return to sections already explored, or make use of all the buildings to make each time you walk through the door a worthwhile interaction, I feel like that's a massive opportunity missed. My only concern with that as well is that I, for the life of me, cannot think of many quests inside of a city that wouldn't just be fetch quests, but there is a chance that they take the Breath of the Wild route and create all new characters, assets, and areas for each specific side quest to make them all enticing and feel like it's a part of the bigger story. And to return to a previous point, there is open room in the budget with a significantly smaller map, so I'm fairly confident it's at least got to be one of the 3 options I presented, especially with 3 years of development time. One last final idea I wanted to drop on you before I go is that they could make it similar to, say, the anime or Hunter x Hunter's Tower of Heaven, putting heavy emphasis on tournaments and climbing to be the very best in this game. In a world without random trainer interactions on routes and wild Pokemon encounters, it would be pretty sick if they circumvented that by making Pokemon tournaments a significant role in the story. With all that said, I'm both extremely excited and concerned for what will come in late 2025, but regardless of how I feel, I know I'll be ready to play and going into it with a positive mindset. My opinions, criticisms, and theories are ultimately just ways to interact with the community I love dearly, and I sincerely do hope that it's an amazing game. I don't expect it to be perfect, and I don't think anybody does, because at the end of the day, no game is, but I can only hope it's an experience that we can all look back at and say, hey, that was an amazing era. If you like the Pokemon content, please make sure to like and subscribe. I put a lot of effort into these videos and it would mean a lot. See you guys in the next one.